Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
It's the dawning of a new season here tonight. We've got new cars, new faces on track, a new schedule, as well as a new name here on the broadcast. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the S1 Racing GT3 Sprint Series, coming to you live here tonight on Apex Racing TV. My name is Ron Mons. Alongside me in the virtual commentary booth this season is a new name here, Charles Bichelle. Thank you so much for joining us, my friend. And in the virtual production hall, we have our old buddy Joshua Wilkie working all the cameras. And now we've got a lot of storylines heading into the season. Of course, the dominance from Gregory Hovesen really dominated the storylines last season, but coming into this new year, we have a lot to talk about. Obviously, the new Audi R8, which was introduced for this season of iRacing, will definitely be up towards the top. We have plenty of drivers in that car tonight. We have a new schedule, which we'll probably talk about in a few moments' time. And then when it comes to the drivers, we have a lot of new names and new faces to this series that will look to try and knock Season 2 champion Gregory Hovesen off of his A-game. Now, I want to pass this off to my partner in crime this season, Charles. I want to ask you this question real quick. What are some of the storylines that you think we should be focusing on throughout the season?
Well, Ron, thanks. It's great to be here tonight. And so I'm just kind of looking, and I've just been sitting in practice. Obviously, being new, I'm trying to learn on the fly here. But it looks like I know, yeah, we talked about Greg Hovesen, just a dominant performance last season. Looks like that might be the case again this season. Kyle Domark, obviously, another great driver in here. But I'm really looking at that third place battle. There's a lot of drivers that are really in that same rating area. So generally means that they're around the same pace. So it's going to be interesting to see who is the most consistent driver during the course of the season that can challenge for that final podium step.
I think consistency is definitely key. That consistency issue certainly bit some drivers last season. We saw a very close championship fight between Kyle Domark, who ended the season with a win and P2 in the championship. He was locked in a really tight battle with Justin Dive Bomber Barrera throughout the season for P2 in the championship. It was really the closest championship fight that we had, especially up towards the front. So I think the point that you mentioned there of consistency being really important throughout this season, that is going to play really big when it comes time to not only fighting for a championship, if Gregory Hovesen possibly has any kind of screw up throughout the season, or it's just trying to be be anyone else other than Gregory Hoverson trying to fight for P2 or P3 in the championship. I think even though Gregory Hoverson right now staking claim on the pole position right now, even though it looks like he's going to try and continue his dominance throughout this season, there's still a lot of storylines when it comes to the championship fight, and we have a lot to cover. So it's we've got a new schedule, obviously, this season. Last season, it was Sebring that kicked off the other season, but here we are starting at the wonderful Canadian Tire Motorsports Park in, I believe, Bowmanville, Ontario, if I'm not mistaken. I might have gotten the town name wrong, but it's a beautiful circuit. It has a wonderful history to it. Formula One raced here many, many moons ago. IndyCar raced here many, many moons ago, back when it was sanctioned by USAC, and there's also been many IMSA races. IMSA still races here. NASCAR raced here back in the day, and still the NASCAR Pinty Series runs at this wonderful track in Canada, one of the premier motorsports facilities in the country of Canada, and it will play host to the season opener here tonight. And then 2 weeks time we'll be going to Hockenheim. That'll be a pretty good race, and then it's quite fitting that we'll be running at the Daytona Road Course, I believe, just a few weeks before the actual IMSA season in real life gets started. Really, the racing season period, I feel, always starts with a Rolex 24 at Daytona. That'll be the third round of this season. That'll be on January the 10th here on Apex. And then we have Suzuka 2 weeks after that. Mugello will be on February 7th. That's a new addition to the iRacing platform, so I'm sure a lot of drivers are looking forward to that round. And then to end the season, we'll be running at the wonderful Bathurst. That played host to a fantastic race this past season, so I think we've got some pretty good races on our hands here. So Charles, what's a race you're looking forward to the most?
I tell you what, I'm just looking up and down this calendar, with the exception of Daytona. Daytona has its own challenges, but it's a very, very technical group of tracks that we're going to be racing this season. I love CTMP. It took me forever to learn how to drive this track, but once you finally get the rhythm of it, it's amazing to drive. And it would be my vote for the next one for iRacing to upgrade, because they've done a lot of work here in real life to expand the concrete a little bit and make it a little bit easier to correct mistakes. I actually like Hockenheim. Suzuka will be a big challenge, I think, with the introduction of Fuji a couple seasons ago. Suzuka maybe not gets run as much as it used to. But still, and then we've got Mugello, which is a brand new track, and so this may be the first time or second time that most of these drivers will even have seen it. So that'll be an unknown. That may be the X factor of the season. And then finally, Bathurst. It's a great track to watch a race. I can't drive it, so I'm just. But it is fantastic racing, and it's, once again, it's a very technical track, very precision-oriented track. So this is going to be, like I said, we talk about consistency. This is not a group of tracks that you're going to have to work really hard to be consistent at all of these.
I think precision is the name of the game at a track like Mugello, which is very old school in its design. Certainly, this track is fairly old school, and I do agree with the point you mentioned there of iRacing trying to rescan this, because I believe this is one of the oldest scans in the game. It's one of the originals. It was probably scanned back in the very early 2010s, very late 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a fairly old scan. And going through turn 2 right here, you can see all the grass runoff on the outside. That's all pretty much concrete now. So there are a lot of modifications that have been made to this track, but it still takes a lot of finesse to drive, even with those modifications and safety features added. It's still an old school track with an old school flair, and maybe we'll see some old school racing like it tonight. Certainly, we're seeing an old school butt kicking in qualifying, as Gregory Hoverson is going to continue his dominance from last season and take the pole position in a fairly convincing fashion. He's running the Lamborghini this year, so I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he ran that for 1 or 2 races last season. I may be wrong on that regard, but I haven't seen too much of him in the Lamborghini. Really haven't seen too much of the Lamborghini in GT3 racing, whether it's been this series, whether it's been the ARL GT3 series. That's also here on Apex Racing TV. You can catch that on Fridays here. It's not really a car I see too much of, so it's a bit of an unknown quantity to me personally, but I think it's looking good for Gregory Hoverson right now. We're going to get the starting grid here in the not too distant future. Just some of the drivers are rounding out their laps here, but we're about to get the starting grid here soon. I was about to go over some of the stuff that happened last season. It was Season 2 champion Gregory Hoveson continuing his claim on this series, the Delta Sport driver, grabbing the pole position at 1:15.922. So he's the only driver to break into the 1:15 barrier. That's Kyle Domark, his teammates starting alongside those who finished 1-2 in the championship. They started 1-2 here in the season opener race for Season 3. That's Spencer Retzma in P3, just barely getting beat out by Kyle Domark. That's pretty close between those two. That'll be a nice battle to keep our eyes on. That's Jake Luther in P4 on up and down season. He looks to have a bit more of a consistent season here. He'll be starting the race in the 4th position. Bradley Alvis will be your 5th place starter, a little bit farther behind. And then Justin Hall, we've got a bunch of Justins here in this field. The first of them is Justin Hall. He will be in 6th. That's Sammy Hendricks, a new name to the series if I'm not mistaken. He'll be lining up alongside series admin Simon Attrell. He had an up and down season last year, got hit by many falling anvils throughout the year, so hopefully Season 2 looks a lot better for the series admin. And then we have Eric Bialata in P9. The driver starting alongside him is Justin Dive Bomber Barrera, who finished P3 in the standings, ended the season with a fairly controversial accident with, I believe it was Retzma, if I'm not mistaken, ended his chances of fighting for P3 in the championship. He will be your final starter in the top 10 tonight. That's Matthew Perrin in P11, just the last of the drivers within a second of the pole. The Echelon Sim Sport driver lining up in P11 in the 007 car. I like the little James Bond reference there. That's Santinder Dehinza in P12, the driver from California running in the number 10 car. He will be in P12 for this race. And then comes time for this name that I've been fearing that I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of. We have Mitch Buneta. I apologize. He will be lining up in P13. Hopefully, between now and the end of the season, we'll finally be able to get his name pronunciation correctly. He will be starting in P13. Our producer Josh Buenaventura, there we go, thank you Josh, being my hero tonight. He will be starting alongside Chris Casano, the driver for RPM Racing, 1.2 seconds off of the pole. And then it's Wesley Griffith in P15. Shane Brown will be in 16th, and then Sharif Grizzle, who did not set a qualifying time, he'll be your 17th and last place starter, the driver from Canada, rounding out the field in tonight's race. So we have a long lap here to kind of get the juices flowing, get all these drivers enough time to get their cars and their tires heated up before they attack turn 1, which will be a very challenging corner to start off the race. A very short run between when they catch the green and when they're going to have to slam on the brakes, get slowed down, and try and navigate those very tricky corners. This isn't a track that you see too many overtaking opportunities at, so I think this is going to be a race that really you have to depend on the pit stops. We certainly saw that a lot last season, where the biggest field shuffles came in the pit stops, so that'll be something to keep our eyes on in tonight's race. But I think of all the overtaking opportunities, once they hit the end of the Mario Andretti straightaway, that will be the biggest one. So I'll ask you this question real quick here, Charles. What do you think these drivers are going to be thinking and strategizing when it comes to overtaking each other tonight?
I think that I think you're right. I think obviously, as we're on here on the Andretti Straight now, this is the going into the S's at the end of this is the prime overtake opportunity. But basically, it's being able to capitalize on other drivers' mistakes. There's a lot of challenging corners. You talked about turn 1, especially at the start on cold tires. Turn 2 is always very difficult. And then you've got Moss Corner, that double right-hander, about halfway through the lap takes you on to the Andretti Straight. You'll see a lot of cars off in the gravel there, but luckily with the physics updates to the off tracks, a lot of these mistakes that would normally kill your car are now catchable, and you can go out and you can try and make up the time you may have lost.
Yeah, it's very forgiving with the new updates to the off-road physics, but hopefully if they ever release a scan of this track, it'll be a lot more forgiving. So the S1 Series is about to kick off. The pace cars made that hard right turn to go into the pits, and the green flag is out. And it's a good start for the Delta Sport driver there of Gregory Hoveson, your Season 2 champion. Pulls out to an early lead, getting ahead of his teammate there as they enter turn 1. The rest of the field still going side by side a little farther in the back, while a lot of them are slotting in and trying to go single file and just keep their cars clean on lap 1. Certainly in these 45-minute races, the last thing you want to do is wreck your car on lap 1. Certainly there's a driver wrecking their car farther behind. That's a Porsche there off. I'm not sure who that is. Oh, and even more corners farther up the road. That's an incident in turn 3 involving 2 cars. You can see a Ferrari and a Porsche involved in that. We have to get some replays to see what in the world has happened. But besides a few drivers going off early on, it's been a fairly clean start for your front runners. Right now, it's a Delta Sport 1-2 between Gregory Hoveson and Kyle Domark. Gregory Hoveson, your Season 2 champion, maintaining a lead very early on in this race. I believe we might get some replays here to see what in the world happened in those first few corners. I believe the first replay we're going to get here is a contact that happened in turn 3. We are following, the 4th place runner going into, and you can see a mistake there from Retsma, and just it ends in total disaster for those two. Lucky Retsma didn't get hit by the onslewing Audi. That would have been absolutely disastrous for all of those drivers if they got caught up in an incident, but thankfully for those two, the only thing they have is some flat spot tires and some bruised egos very early on, but it has set them back.
Yeah, definitely. You lose a lot of time like that, but it was a slide into turn 3. We did see in the background that was Buenaventura, I believe, that was off the track. Of all the cars on this track, the Porsche is probably the most difficult to be able to control, especially on cold tires, especially into turn 2 because of the nature of that corner. The Porsche just kind of likes to lose the rear. As we see a shot here from the back, and we get the change just coming into turn 2 and just on the outside, and yep, just too much speed, and was fortunate to be, and just clip the wall, and so it's a big hit for him. So that's going to put him way down and probably off pace with the front end damage.
I'm not sure. I believe, yeah, you can see on the left-hand side of your screen on the SDK graphics, he has now pulled into the pits. So that is going to wreak havoc to his race. We have 45-minute races to deal with. All the drivers have to take a pit stop at some point during the race, and Buenaventura, unfortunately, will not be able to make it the rest of the race from this very early pit stop to make it to the finish on fuel. So he will be relegated to a fairly far down finish unless there's other drivers further up the road that have run into issues. You can see him on pit road in the number 17 car right now, so a very tough start to his season. Hopefully he can go out there, try and get some laps, get some experience in that Porsche, and trying to use that throughout the rest of the season. But meanwhile, the battle up towards the front hasn't really been much of a battle. Gregory Hoveson took the early punch early on, got the jump on his teammate, and managed to slot into P1. So right now it's a Delta Sport 1-2, but I believe Justin Hall last lap actually set the fastest lap of the race. I'll take a look at my live timing screen right now to see what they did. Thank you, Josh, for the graphic. Very quick change there. He said a 1 minute 16.512, so you can see that's a little bit quicker than the drivers further up the road, but he has a bit of a gap to close in right now. So even though he is setting in those fastest laps, which is pretty impressive, he'll definitely have to try and keep that consistency going, and also he has to try and save up his stuff, because one thing that we have seen with Gregory Hoveson, it's been a hallmark of the dominance he showed last season, and maybe some of the dominance we might see this season between not only him, but Delta Sport with his teammate Kyle Domark as well. What we saw from Gregory Hoveson last season is, whether it be on lap 2 or whether it be on lap 22 right before a pit stop, he's always been able to turn up the wick and set a fastest lap right before the pits. So that's something we saw a lot of from Gregory Hoveson last season. We saw him setting fastest laps right before he was about to pull in. So it takes a lot of talent, it takes a lot of brains to pull that off, because with these GT cars, even though the tires are a bit on the harder end, they are a lot more durable. They are still susceptible to wear, and the fact he managed to set those very fast lap times so late into his stint was really impressive. So that's something we have to keep our eyes on with Gregory Hoveson throughout this season.
I agree. I think Domark's doing a really good job just kind of to match his pace. He's only a half second behind, so he's right in there. And it'll be interesting to see if it stays 1-2 and that close during the remainder of the race, if there's going to be a challenge among teammates for that race win.
And that'll be a I gotta wonder if there's any sort of I doubt that team orders would play a big role. Certainly played a bit of a role into the finish of last season when Kyle Domark took a I say fairly shock victory. He was the only person to challenge his teammate all throughout the season, and he managed to get it done at the final race of the season, albeit a little bit of team orders played a bit of a role in that, but certainly team orders are not affecting this battle between Jake Luther and Cassano. You can see those two were shuffling, going down the Mario Andretti straightaway, about to enter turn 8, going into turn 10 here. That's very close between those two, and they not a change of position there yet, but that's still some pretty close stuff here that we've seen some pretty awesome racing there over the years. That's really, I mean, I outlined it at the opening part of this broadcast right before we, actually, I say opening part, I outlined it right before the race start on the parade lap, how going down the Mario Andretti straightaway is really the only real overtaking opportunity unless you have a big pair of cojones on you and you want to slip a wheel down the inside of any other corners on this track. That's really the place that we see so many battles flare up. We've seen it on the Radical Racing Challenge, now renamed to the Radical Esports Cup. You can catch that on Fridays here on Apex Racing TV. But that's really the biggest flare-up where we see of battles, and it's so important to have a great run coming out of this corner, and then you have to get out on the gas as hard as you can, but try not to have too much slip, and get a great run coming onto this straightaway and going down it. We're taking a look at the speed from Luther, getting the slipstream from that Audi ahead. We'll see if he tries to get a move done here at the end of the straightaway. He's closing in pretty slowly, but he might just try and take a smart roll. You can see we're only 6 minutes into this race, so he might try and might not try to force the issue too much. I say that, he goes for a bold move there, going down the inside. He's going to be stuck on the outside this time around, but he manages to get the move done before they get into the corner. So Jake Luther moves into P10, and meanwhile, I believe that's Spencer Retsma trying to get a move done on Cassano there as well. So Retsma and the Ferrari trying to get the move done on the new Audi. We've got a battle of the new cars here on the iRacing platform. That was a great move there from Luther.
Yeah, it really was. I was watching that, and Cassano did a good job coming down the straight. He stayed to the right-hand side. It was a very defensive line, and just, I think he maybe moved over to open that first corner, and the S is up, and maybe did a little too early, and left Luther a chance to make that move, or I'm sorry, Bellotta a chance to make that move, and he took advantage of it. And then once Cassano got offline, then it was fairly easy for Luther to just kind of sneak through there and take a spot also.
That was a very big snap that I think Retsma had here. He just, oh wow, was he? Okay, I was about to say, he nearly just pulled off a move around the outside. He did. Okay, he managed to get that move done going down the straightaway. That was a brilliant move there from Retsma. We just cut to it on time. We were riding on board with him, and he had a pretty big snap there going into the very technical section there, but you can see Retsma, that battle was not done yet between him and Cassano. I think this is definitely going to flare up in the next few laps, but they're battling for P11 currently. But that was a beautiful move that Retsma managed to pull off going into Moss corner of turn 5, A, B, and C. It's very strange the way North American tracks name the corners, well, number the corners, but that's just me. But that was a very tense moment between those two, and he managed to get the move done, but he's lost it. Coming out of the corner, was that Retsma? I believe it. Yeah, that was Retsma.
It was Retsma.
It just had a massive moment coming out of turn 1, slammed into the outside wall, and I believe he's going to be out of it. Yeah, I believe he's stopped by the side of the track, and he is towing. Retsma is done. So right as I was praising him for a fantastic move, he goes and blows it. Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering what caused that. I'm sure Josh will get us a replay here in just a second. But it looked like, I'm not sure if he caught the inside curb or the outside curb, but apparently something really upset the car and just had lost the rear end and was into the wall before you could even think about it. See the replay coming up here. It's the inside curb and then the outside curb, and yeah, they just kicked the rear end loose, and he tried to correct it and just overcorrected and outside wall, and that's going to put him back down to the bottom of the order.
That's a really frustrating mistake to make because I've made that so many times myself. That curb is deadly coming out of that final corner. It's so tall. Usually, most of the curbs on this track are fairly flat. I mean, they are punishing at times, but that one was particularly painful. He just he just ran out of room, ran off the road, hit that curb, and it cost him so badly. I believe you can bottom out over that curb. I've certainly done that in many a car, whether it be GT3 machinery, open wheel machinery, or the other radicals as well. I've made that mistake so many times coming through that corner. It's so frustrating to make a mistake like that, especially so early on in this race. I mean, we haven't even broken the 10-minute mark. So for him to make a mistake very early on, I'm sure he's kicking himself right now. Because of that mistake, he's had to tow back to the pits as relegated down, but he can see a move there from Luther on Bellotta. That was a fantastic move coming through Moss. He just managed to slip in there quite nicely. I believe Bellotta had a little bit of slip coming through that corner. It cost him a little bit, and just running wide a little bit, it cost him that position.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's what I'm seeing is there's a couple of drivers who were a little unsure of the braking zones and when to brake for Moss, and that is probably the most difficult is to try and get your braking right would be Moss Corner. And I think Luther was just a little more aggressive and was able to release the brakes a little earlier and managed to get to the inside and make that pass. It was a great move.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into having confidence in the GT3 machinery, because at a track like this, so tight, twisty, and technical, you have to have confidence in the machinery that you have underneath you. And then one thing, the one little unique quirk about this series is that these drivers don't have their own bespoke setups. These setups are fixed for this series, so all the drivers in the same machinery are running the exact same setup. So it's really, you just have to have laps upon laps upon laps in practice and qualifying just to build up confidence in your race car. And at a track like this, which, as I said, is so confidence driven, that could be the reason why we're seeing some drivers make mistakes. There's a little mistake there from Simon Attrell coming onto the Mario Andretti straightaway. Runs wide coming through Moss, does a little bit of long mowing on exits, but I don't think it sacrificed his exit too badly. As you can see, he's still got a fairly large gap to the Audi behind him. That is the 7th place runner of, taking a look at my live timing screen, that's the 7th place runner of Sammy Hendricks, who I've seen some support in the other YouTube chat for. So he's currently running in 7th, right behind series founder Simon Attrell, and right behind him there's a pretty good battle developing between Pern and Luther. I saw them going side by side into turn 8, so that battle did cooled off quite a little bit. But right now you can see the train action here between these 4 cars, and you can see Luther trying to get the move done coming into the first corner. That would have been very bold if he tried to make that move off. I think some of these drivers are feeling a little bit, maybe just a tad bit impatient currently, which I think is a little bit of a misplaced sort of emotion to be feeling right now. As I've said, these races are so long, they're 45 minutes long. We have a mandated pit stop that all these drivers have to deal with, and these drivers are still racing like it's towards the end of the lap. I mean, we appreciate it. As broadcasters, we're seeing these drivers give it everything very early on in this race, and wow, that's a bold move, trying to go around the outside of Moss. Is he going to be able to stick to it? I don't believe so. So you can see Luther had to back out of it a little bit, but if he managed to pull off that around the outside overtake on Pern, we would definitely have to submit that as a highlight from the race, because that would have been a move that I've never seen before in my many years doing sim racing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he might have been a little shocked himself that he was able to make up that distance through Moss. I think another unknown quantity is the Audis are brand new. This is like, this is the first week. Oh, as we said, spin there. Perrin just
very
loose
close
there. Yep. Oh,
yeah,
and he's just
nearly,
very smart.
and nearly got T-boned there by Bialotta, I believe, so that could have ended in total disaster if those two made contact. But that's a shame for Pern. He was putting together a very good race, running firmly inside the top 10, but sadly for him, it just wasn't meant to be, as he's towed back. But that was, just as you were bringing up the point of the Audi being an unknown quantity, that happened. So
yeah, exactly.
Sorry for interrupting there.
No, that's okay. Yeah, we'll see
a
the
replay here. See just how much of an unknown quantity that Audi is coming through the second to last corner. Just runs a little bit wide, and simple mistake, and it ends in tears.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's another thing you're talking about, the fixed setup, is now we've got a brand new car. So you've had the car basically a week. You've done some fun races with it during the week 13, and so now you're racing for real, and you're on, as we keep saying, a very technical track. So the old Audi was the car that was probably the best handling of the GTs, I would say, as far as side to side. But as I always told my drivers in our team, I say it's the one car that's going to try and kill you while you're racing it. I don't know if the new Audi has that same feature, but apparently it's already caught a couple of drivers out, and it probably won't be the last time we've seen something like that during the course of the season.
Hey, I gotta think those unknown quantity race cars are just the biggest storyline that we followed from the series ever since the series first joined Apex here last season. Of course, a big storyline was a new Ferrari. A lot of drivers chose that new Ferrari, and a lot of their races ended in total disaster. There were plenty of drivers making mistakes and hitting those curves in the Ferrari, which those curves and those Ferraris were not on speaking terms. But wow, Jake Luther pulls off a pretty good move there on the Audi to move into P7. So Jake Luther putting in a very good drive right now. Take a look at my live timing screen, but he's moved up quite a lot Actually, no, he's actually down 3 positions. My apologies, but ever since he made a mistake early on in this race, he's been on the comeback, got involved in that incident on lap 1, and he's just been clawing his way through the field. So he's putting together a good race right now, and with the way things are going for him currently, he might be able to break into the top 5 here soon. The final driver in the top 5 is Justin Barrera, who's moved up 5 spots from a P10 starting spot. So he's put together a pretty good drive currently in P5. And then we have Chris Casano, who's moved up 4 positions. He's currently running a P10. So a lot of drivers having some good evenings so far. Casano being in the Audi, he's one of the higher up drivers. You can see Hall running in P3, the last of the podium runners in that Audi. He's actually put together some very good laps. I believe still holds the fastest lap, if I'm not mistaken, at a 1:16.45. So you can see that Audi is a little bit volatile. It does draw comparisons to the Ferrari from last season, how the Ferrari didn't respond too well to curbs. It was fairly edgy, but if those drivers could master that Ferrari, they were able to drive it to absolute perfection. So I think that Audi might be a new case this season, so we'll see just how these drivers tend to struggle, and who knows, we might see some drivers jumping ship between cars throughout this season. We'll just have to wait and see, and that was a bold move there from Jake Luther trying to get it done on Simon Admiral.
I tell you what, Luther has got Moss down to a T. He is doing a great job. He's making up 2 or 3 tenths on the cars in front of him every time he comes through that section of track. Just he's making it look easy through there. And yeah, we've seen him make good moves through there, make attempts at passes, and now he's got the inside line to make the pass over Attrell and gets it done. And so he's moved up another position, back up to P6.
I will say one thing, if anyone in the other YouTube chat would like to look at a different perspective of this, you can actually take a look at Simon Admiral's perspective of these races. He streams them on his own channel, S1 Races. You can check that out here on YouTube. He's not paying me to say that, but I took a look at his view at Bathurst last season after he was a camera car of an incident we had on lap at the end of the race, coming into the chase on the final lap of the race. He was right behind drivers battling for the last top 5 position, and they all crashed. So that was a nice view to look at him have a Cheshire Cat's grin as he saw that incident happen ahead of him. So if you'd like to take a look at that perspective after this broadcast here on Apex Racing TV, you know where to go for that. But right now, a man who hasn't really seen much action is Gregory Hoveson. He has his teammate trailing him just a little bit. About 0.4 of a second has been the gap between those two throughout all of this race, and really it's just another masterclass drive from both Delta Sport drivers. They are pulling away. Actually, I say that they're not really pulling away from Hall. The gap is still about 2 seconds to him, so the gaps have really stayed the same up towards the front. It's really been the midfield where most of the action has come from. But one point that I always bring up on these broadcasts that never comes true is that Domark being in the slipstream of his teammate for so long, he might try and pull off a different strategy, but those two being teammates, you don't really want split strategies with teammates, so you don't really see much of that. However, with Justin Hall running in the Audi a little bit farther behind, it's about 2 seconds of a gap between him and Hoveson, about 1.5 seconds between him and Domark. I gotta imagine it might be very faint, but he definitely has to pick up some kind of slipstream from the cars up ahead, and he must be getting at least a slightly bit better fuel mileage. So I gotta wonder, would Justin Hall try and extend this a little bit, take a little less fuel at that pit stop and try and jump ahead of these two? Because as we said towards the start of this broadcast, this may be a track position race where a lot of these drivers try and make up time and make up positions in the pit stops. So I'll pass this off to you, Charles. From your perspective, if you were Justin Hall or his teammates or his team owner, what would you pick for a strategy?
Yeah, I think if I could extend, I probably would. I would try and just carry that fuel out as much as I could. But honestly, I just don't know how much he's being able to save with a 2-second gap up to the next car. Yeah, he may be getting a little bit, but my guess is he's just really trying to push and just keep in touch with those two guys, hoping that one of them make a mistake. And he can capitalize on it. I think probably Domark is probably in the best position for fuel saving at this point. Obviously, he's just basically been riding behind his teammates since the start of the race. So if anybody's able to do that, it would be him. Luther, obviously, as we're watching on screen, has just been, cutting his way back through the field. So he's not saving anything at this point. He's doing a great job just to try and make up from the earlier mistake, and he's doing it, like I said, doing a fantastic job of that.
I'll tell you, I think it's a masterclass drive currently from the Delta Sport team. I mean, they're pulling the gap. They're doing the same strategy that they pulled many times throughout last season, and I think they'll still pit on the same lap and just try and do it. But maybe if I was Domark, maybe I'd rebel a little bit and try and extend it a little bit, but I've never been part of a sim racing team, so I'm definitely not in a position for that. And after that quote, I don't think any sim racing team would want to hire me. That's the reason I'm in the comms box and not behind the wheel. But I think it's I can imagine Domark is going to fall in line because, I mean, he's in a position to secure P2 in the championship. He got P2 last season, even though he actually didn't race in the first race of the year. He only raced 5 times out of the 6 races, but he still managed to do very well. Finished P2 in the championship, won a race. Of course, the only race that Gregory Hoverson didn't win last season. The Delta Sport teammates really cut up last season like a fat kid would cut up his own birthday cake if he could eat it all by himself. It takes a fat kid to know one. So, those two put on a great drive. They put on a fantastic drive all of last season. Hoverson won the first 5 races, and then Domark just had a small little win at the end of the season to secure P2 in the championship. So I think those two are going to maintain that sort of command. But the point that we were mentioning of Hall trying to push a little bit, I think he's given up on his assault, albeit the pit stops are probably coming up here soon. But you can see that gap between Domark and Hall has increased a little bit. It's now 2.8 seconds between him and Hoverson, so that gap is spread out a little bit between those two. The gap between Hoverson and Domark hasn't even moved an inch, so I think Hall, maybe he's just used up his stuff too much and he's now feeling the burn of that, or maybe he's just deciding to extend it a little bit on the fuel. I think that is really the smart move that he needs to make to maintain that podium position. You can't just do exactly the same as your competitors, otherwise you're not going to beat them if you do exactly the same. But wow, I've been talking about fat kids eating cake. That's not derogatory. I'm fairly chubby myself. We've been following this battle with Chris Casano. That's a beautiful photo there. Looks straight out of the 1980s. He's currently running a P10 in that Audi, and he's holding off the other BMW right behind him, the 11th place runner there. And you can see Eric Bellata in the Ferrari. That is a very striking livery, red and I'm not even sure what that color is. I guess it would be like pale aqua. I'm not too sure. It looks like it looks aquamarine. Our producer Josh says it looks like the kind of color that you'd see in like a dentist's office. It's a very strange color, but it's a very striking livery. I give him credit. The number 97 car definitely stands out on circuit, and he's running in a good position right now. P9 at the end of this fairly long train of cars. You can see 4 of them right up the road, so it's a nice little tight pack here that we have right outside the top 5.
Yeah, this is the biggest battle, or I would say the closest battle on track with these 4 cars: Alvis, Attrell, Hendricks, Bellata. Luther's kind of extended that gap out once he's managed to work his way through this group. And so, yeah, it's just be interesting to see as we are getting ready. As I was about to talk about pit stops, here's Alvis into the pits now. First of our pitters for the race.
And that is a very early stop, but you gotta do something different other than your competitors, because as I said, what's the point in racing if you aren't going to just fall in line and do everything that your competitors do? You gotta find a way to break up the norm and switch it up a little bit. So that's a very early pit stop there from Alvis. He's going to take a lot of fuel, so this is going to be a long pit stop from him. He's going to drop outside the top 10. You can see he's now gotten that pit stop done. 12.7 seconds in the box for him, so he'll be exiting the pits. As my voice suddenly dies for some unknown reason, he'll be exiting the pits in P11, so he'll have a little bit of time to make up, but he'll also have, you can see, clean road ahead of him. The next car up the road is Griffith, who's about 3 seconds ahead. So he has a bit of he has clean air and a clean track ahead of him. So he's definitely going to have to use these laps, exiting the pits to try and push and close up the gap and try and jump ahead of the drivers that were ahead of him in that train that he was in not too long ago.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's now he's got clean track. He's got to just basically run hot laps until and work through any traffic that he may encounter on the way, and just hope that that's enough to leapfrog the other cars that he was battling with when he came in.
Yeah, you got take advantage. You gotta strike while the iron's hot, I think would be the correct technical term there, and he definitely needs to do that. He was part of this battle, but you could see, I mean, I believe he was running at the tail end of that fight, so he was getting the most slipstream, but he was also getting the worst dirty air of them all. At a track like this, I mean, when we go to tracks later on this season that are a bit more straight line dependent and straight line important, those will be the ones where we have the drivers really valuing the draft. But at a track like this, where the fuel saving does play a little bit of a role, because obviously strategy is a big part of how things will turn out tonight, but that dirty air is just so bad coming through the corners, and there's no real slow corners on this circuit besides Moss, so you get those medium to high speed corners, and that's where the dirty air hurts you the most. So I can't really blame him for pitting early, trying to do something different, and we'll see how things work out for him. I don't think it will be very long until these three drivers come in. You can see Adriel farther up the road at the top of this trio. We're following Balada currently, riding on board with him coming through the turn 8-9 section here. We'll see if anyone takes that turn. None of them do, so that is that section of the field not pitting yet, but I wouldn't be too shocked if we start to see the leaders coming out. I believe Cassano has actually pitted that, or he had some kind of issue that we didn't see, but he is in the pits now, currently running in P14, so you can see him pitting from a farther position down the pack. He was running in P10, so he pits from P14 and has been in there for a long time. So
that's a very long pit stop.
Yeah, what in the world happened? We might have to get a replay from our producer Josh if he had any sort of incident to see what happened.
I'm looking at the timing here, and we'll see if it comes at 53-ish seconds on his exit. Let's see what we get here. So I think Josh has got us a replay.
Look at it.
Through turn 2.
This is into Moss here.
This is Moss. That's right.
Spin and
just tow it back to the pits. Yep.
I think he did. All right.
I think he did.
That was fairly uneventful, but I think a little bit of frustration. He wasn't running in the best position in the world, so I can't really blame him too much for just calling it a night and probably sitting back relaxing for the rest of this race with a beer in his hand. So it's a tough end for his night. He will be in P14. A lot of drivers taken out of this race so far. We had Grizzle, who I believe did not take the start. He did not set a qualifying time either, so he'll be your 17th finisher from tonight, actually not turning in a lap. And then we have Retsma, who had a very hard crash coming out of turn 1. He will be your 16th place finisher from tonight's race. And we have Pern and Cassano. So we have the field slowly dropping down a little bit. We only have 11 drivers on the lead lap currently, 13 of them on track, and many of them have been involved in incidents so far. So it hasn't been the cleanest way of things for these drivers so far. But you can see the battle that we're looking at right now, the train action that's been outside the top 10 has been close here. A lot of drivers going all over the place. There's Retsma, actually, my apologies, that's Admiral trying to get a move done on the lapped car there, the number 69, I believe that was Brown there. So Brown going a lap down to Simon Admiral. We'll see if any of these drivers decide to make the pits. There we go. There's Admiral getting the very late call to get into the pits, very close to the inside wall there. But I think there's other drivers pitting farther up the road. I believe Luther has pulled in as well. So Admiral and Luther pitting here at the minute 28 mark here on lap 23 of this race. So I think it won't be very too long. Certainly it's not going to be long until the drivers that were running in that pack start to pull in as well. And I don't think it's going to be very long until we see Hovis and Domar pull in as well. How long you think, Charles? How long you think until they pull in? Money. I'm betting on about 4 minutes until they pit.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's going to be probably before the 35-minute mark of the race. They'll come in and take that stop to get their fuel for the end of the race. As we see Astral coming out, and Alvis, and so Alvis with the undercut actually is in front of Astral now. So it was a very quick stop for Alvis. As I'm sitting here looking at it, was a second faster pit stop for him. So far that strategy seems to be paying off for him.
Oh, now we have third place runner Justin Hall coming into the pit, so he's pitting. And meanwhile, the point that we mentioned earlier of Gregory Hoverson kicking on the hyper just before he pits, he just set the fastest lap of the race at a 1:16.41, so he is kicking on the afterburner and trying to pull away from his adversaries here right before he comes into the pit. So Justin Hall's in, dropping down the order a little bit. Bialotta is in as well from P6. So all of these drivers are slowly pulling into the pits, but that worked out well for Luther. My apologies, it worked out well for Alvis. I'm getting all my drivers confused here, but the point you mentioned there of Alvis is stopping a second slower, a second faster, my apologies. He had to have underfueled that car to get that added second in the pit, so I gotta wonder if he's gonna have to save fuel like a madman in this second stint here. I mean, we don't have much else in this race. We only have 15 minutes to go here before we're going to take the checkered flag. But I gotta imagine Alvis is going to have to struggle and claw for any bit of miles per hour, miles per gallon that he can get here. He's gonna have to focus on that fuel. We'll probably see him lifting and coasting towards this. So I gotta wonder how this race is going to develop for him. He's pulled a good gap between him and Avril. You can see it's about 2 seconds separating those two, a little bit more than 2 seconds, but that's still a little bit of a gap. And Domark has actually come in earlier than his teammate, I believe. So yeah, you can see Domark dropping down the order. So the Delta Sport drivers splitting the strategy. This is fairly new. We've never seen anything like this between the teammates. A little bit of a mutiny forming here in the Delta Sport team.
Yeah, that is a kind of interesting strategy. Normally, I would expect that the leader, who is doing a lot of the work up front with Domark just kind of hanging behind, would have been the first one in. But in this case, it was actually P2 came in as Hoverson sets another fast lap of the race, 1:16.17, just very, very quick.
And that's I kind of jinxed myself. It was like a reverse jinx earlier on the broadcast. I said that I usually mention how Domark could afford to pull off a different strategy compared to Hoverson. I was expecting him to pit later than his teammate, but he actually comes in earlier. I think he saw the battle with Alvis. I think he saw that farther behind and just realized that he had to come in. Now Hoverson has responded. The leader of the race has pulled into the pits, so we're going to have to keep an eye on him. I believe Justin Barrera will retake the... Actually, no, I apologize. He will not take the lead as he's pulled in too, but you can see Hoverson taking the long trundle down the pit lane. We'll have to keep our eyes peeled on Domark to see if he can jump ahead of his teammates. And hopefully he hasn't been caught up in traffic too badly. I don't believe he has. You can see a 13.5 second pit stop for him. You can take a look at the left-hand side of your screen with these SDK graphics. 12 seconds for Gregory Hoverson. So even with the undercut possibly working, I don't think it's worked out well for Kyle Domark, who managed to take 1.5 seconds longer in the pits than his teammate. And he's actually, after the pit stops are over, he's managed to pull a bigger lead Hoverson has. So now that gap is about 5 seconds between those two. So Hoverson, a little bit of the mutiny there for Delta Sport hasn't worked as Kyle Domark has actually fallen back of his teammate.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive to set laps like that and then take short fuel when you come in and still manage to increase your lead, being the last car essentially going into the pits. And normally we see maybe Domark maybe making up a little bit of ground on this outlap for Hoverson, but it doesn't even seem like that's possible today.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised. It's a pretty good, I wouldn't say an indictment because that sounds like a bad thing, but it's a pretty good showcase of how just ridiculous of a driver Gregory Hoverson has. The fact he managed to pull that off, and in a race that it looked like the undercut was going to be the strategy of choice for all the drivers up and down the field. It looked like that was a good choice for his teammate who pitted a lap earlier. He still managed to exit with a much bigger lead and was setting fastest lap after fastest lap right before he pitted. Gregory Hoverson has just been on racing steroids effectively ever since the start of Season 2 last year. He took a dominant championship win in Season 2, and it looks like, unless something major happens in the final 11 minutes of this race, it looks like he's going to take yet another win. So if it wasn't for Watkins Glen, the season finale last year, he'd be looking at 6 straight wins, which is just absolutely nuts. It shows you how on rails he's been, whether it's been him driving the Porsche, whether it's been him driving the Mercedes, or whether it's been him driving the Lamborghini this season. He's just been on rails.
Yeah, he's doing obviously a fantastic job. So I'm kind of watching the battle now for P3. Hall has been in. Barrera's been in. I'm interested to see what Barrera's out lap time, or his first lap time is going to be. The gap's coming down. It's came down about 3/10 over the last minute or so as I've been kind of keeping an eye on it. So there may be a battle yet for that final podium position.
Yeah, I think that's going to be pretty close. Barrera has put together a very good drive up 6 positions from where he started. So I think he's going to try and look to grab that podium. He had a very rough qualifying. I'm not sure what happened. And I was also taking a look at our series admin, Simon Attrell's stream on his personal channel. And Justin Barrera put in a little message in the YouTube chat for that stream saying that he was slow. So it doesn't really seem like that currently. You can see last lap he set a lap time much quicker than Hall right up the road, even though he did a little bit of lawn mowing exiting turn 1 and again in turn 2. So Barrera is really pushing that BMW right now. He is trying to get everything he can out of that car. We have about 9.5 minutes remaining until the clock is going to strike 0 and these drivers will be nearing the end of the race. So I think Barrera is really turning up the heat, and what he really has to do at a track which is so tight and twisty like Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, he doesn't really have to have the much faster car. He doesn't have to pull off a move. He can just apply pressure to the back of Hall. He doesn't have to do one of the signature dive bombs. Maybe that's where he got the name from. He just needs to put pressure on the back of Hall, currently running in P3. And I think at a track like this, where it's so unforgiving if you make any sort of mistake or have any sort of screw up, he can just apply the pressure to the back of his adversary and manage to get the move done just because of a mistake that Hall might make. So I think Barrera is going to try and implore a little bit of mind games. We might see some flashing of the headlights. We might see Hall and Barrera try and dummy each other and just go for some weird, screwy stuff. We'll see what happens. Meanwhile, Gregory Hoverson puts in another fastest lap to extend the gap between himself and his teammate. That gap is now 6.9 seconds as Hoverson sets a 1 minute 16.1. That is ridiculous speed. He's only about 2/10 off of what he did in qualifying. That's absolutely fantastic. I believe, I'll take a look at my iRacing live timing here real quick, but I believe, yeah, Kyle Domark's qualifying lap time, so not even his time in the race, was a 1 minute 16.14. So Gregory Hoverson just set a lap in the race that was faster than Domark's qualifying time. So it shows you that this man is driving like a bat out of a place that I can't name.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and to add to this, as we're back on board with Barrera, Luther is actually making up the gap behind them. So this may be a 3-car battle before it's all said and done.
That is definitely a good prospect. You can see the left-hand side of your screen. Luther put in a pretty good lap time that time around, closed in by a little less than 2/10 of a second. So I think that observation you made there, Charles, is absolutely right. With the amount of time left in this race, as Gregory Hoverson sets another fastest lap, cementing his claim on that award there, I think Luther is he's not going to be alone. He really has to I mean, it's not a surefire thing unless there's any sort of battling with Hall and Barrera, which could happen. That gap is slowly decreasing with every passing moment, but that gap between Barrera and Luther is decreasing as well. So I think Barrera really has to press the issue here. The gap between him and Hall's about 2 seconds. Meanwhile, the gap between him and Luther is less than 1.5 seconds. It's coming up on about 1 second now. So I think Barrera is really going to have to press his luck here, because if he doesn't try and pull off something drastic to try and move into P3, I think he'll be at risk of losing P4 and dropping back to 5th.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This is going to be one of those that you're going to have to maybe force an issue to make up that ground as he's trying to make that ground back up to Hall. But you're going to have to try and get by him and use him basically as a rear guard. To keep Luther from making a pass on both of them, and yes, was watching the live timing as well. And then we're talking about this battle for P3, and then you've got P6 through 9 that are separated by about 3.5 to 4 seconds. So there's still really good battles on the track. We talk about how Hoverson's basically just checked out, but he's just but there's still really good battles on the track, and there's still points to be made.
Yeah, I gotta wonder, out of all of this, if if Barrera is even going to risk it and try and pull something off, because he does have the gap. If you look between himself and Alvis, that's a fairly large gap. So I think he really needs to pull off something major and try and take some kind of risk. I mean, he has a gap. If something bad were to happen and he were to spin out or go off track, he wouldn't lose out on 6th to Alvis, I believe, but I think Barrera is still not really too keen on losing 5th in this race. So I gotta wonder what's going to happen in this fight. I think Hall is pulling away. I think it's not even that Hall's pulling away. I think it's just the fact that Barrera is slowly feeling the pressure from Luther right behind, and I think it won't be very long until we see a battle between those two. We just struck the 40-minute mark. Gregory Hoverson pulling away as we didn't want it to happen after the butt kicking he pulled on the field last season, but it is happening right now. We sort of expected it in a way, because he just kicked butts so badly last season that it just hurt. I mean, I can imagine he hurt his foot kicking everyone's butts last season, so it's looking good for him now to stake his claim on season 3 here. But you can see the left-hand side of your screen, Hall, Barrera, and you can see Luther was the only one of those two, only one of those 3, my apologies, to set a lap time below the 1:17 barrier. So Luther is really a man on a mission. I think he's too far away to really challenge Hall for the final podium position, but I think he'll definitely be within a good shot of closing up on Barrera. Meanwhile, Sammy Hendricks has had off. That's, you can see the hood of the Audi there is missing. He made some kind of mistake coming through turn 2. We're going to replay here to see what in the world happened to him.
Yeah, we're coming down here into turn 2. And just, no, yep. So basically was felt the rear coming around and tried to correct, and once again over-corrected these cars. You end up sliding, but then all of a sudden, as soon as you try and correct and you open the wheel up, the grip just magically returns, and the next thing you know, you're pointed 90 degrees in the other direction.
Those GT3 cars are always a bit of a pain in the butt. I don't know why I nearly said that with a very strange accent. I nearly said butt there, but I'm more of an open wheel guy myself, so I've never really gone too big of a hang and gotten too comfortable with the GT3 cars. There's just some little weird quirks and features to them that these drivers have to master. A lot of them have. Jake Luther has in the late stages of this race. You can see that gap is minuscule between him and Justin Barrera. Justin, he's going to have to focus on getting those good braking, attacking the braking zones as much as he can. Certainly this one here coming into Moss. Jake Luther has managed to master this series of corners here so well. You can see how much he closed up there. So Barrera, what he really has to focus on is getting a good exit out of the Mario Andretti straightaway, because that's the only hope that he really has of maintaining this position. I say that, you can see the gap is closing between those two. It's fairly small. I think it's staying fairly even now. I say that Luther is closing in. He might try and go for a move here coming into 8. You can see they're closing about a car length separate them at this late stage of the race. You can see barely 2.5 minutes left in this 45-minute race here, and Justin Barrera is trying to do everything he can, driving the widest BMW known to man, to hold off this challenger here from Luther. It's going to be real tough, but I think I think it's a losing fight. I think Barrera may as well just cut his losses and let him by, but it's not a racing driver's move to do, to just let someone else by. So I think it might be a move here coming into turn 5 where Barrera is going to lose out on P4.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm be looking for, to see what Luther does, how he sets up, if he's going to set up Moss Corner. As we've seen all race long, he's got that corner just figured out. And so see if he can set up something here to get side by side with Barrera coming through the corner. Yep, he's looking inside. Not quite enough, but he's right there. Now he's going to try and get the slipstream down the straight. Barrera's going to stay really defensive at the end of this. He's going to have to stay over to the right as long as he possibly can to try and keep Luther from making that dive to the inside, which we've seen on a couple other cars also.
I was thinking that Luther was going to pull off a bump and run there. That was incredibly close to contact as they went through turn 5. So the fact that I think there was definitely a little bit of contact there. There's going to be contact here as Luther makes a massive mistake. coming through turn 8, runs wide coming into 9, clips a curb massively, and these two are going to lose out on the position there. You can see the car buzzing by there. Barrera is upset with his adversary, and understandably so. He's going to drop down to P6, and now he's going to fall to crutches of the drivers behind. But that was an almighty accident, and it's lucky both of them didn't damage their cars to the point of having to retire from the race. Barrera, he's in some real trouble. You can see he's off once again coming through 1. He's going to lose another spot, I feel, here. He is not going to be very happy, and I think we'll have to look at a replay, thank you Josh, here to see what in the world happened. We're following Luther coming through 8. The desperation set in a little bit. He tried to get a move done here, and it just, ooh, a little bit of bunny hop there. That was you got to feel bad for the both of them, and then a little bit of contact there once those cars are stopped. But that's such an avoidable accident, and it's a little bit of desperation, I feel, from Luther, which I think is misplaced there. But meanwhile, Gregory Hoveson has been flawless throughout this race. He's going to take a commanding win to kick this season off. Your Season 2 champion starts off Season 3 in the best way possible, taking the win to the fastest lap and doing all that from the pole. Kyle Domark, his teammate, will finish the race in P2, the Delta Sport team taking a 1-2, and it's going to be a pretty long way back until Justin Hall will finish on the podium there. So that was, oh wow, that was a lot going on there in a lot of moments, and Justin Hall he wasn't affected by many of it. Luther finishes in 5th, Attrell finishes in 6th, Bialotta in 7th. Justin Barrera pulls into the pits at the last minute. I believe he had some kind of I'm not sure. I'll take a look to see if he had any kind of penalty or a meatball flag to serve there, but he pulls into the pits right at the end of the lap, understandably disgusted after how everything went for him. That was such a shame for the both of them on that last lap. We're taking a look at a replay again to see what happened here. Luther strains it up a little bit, misjudges it badly, hits that curb, gets a lot of airtime, and then just a tiny bit of contact between those two ends an absolute disaster.
Yeah, I think that was just a mistiming by Luther. I think he was carrying so much more speed than Barrera, and then Barrera taking the inside line on that. And he didn't really have much choice except to just open the wheel up and straighten the car. And then I've never seen anybody jump that curb before. So that's a new one. And then obviously once you're airborne, you don't have any control, and you're at the mercy of gravity and forward momentum. And then contact made. I think somebody will be going to the principal's office later.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if there were some slaps on the wrist after that incident. And it was really avoidable, I think. From my perspective, at least, Luther had the faster car, and even though they were, I believe, going to take the white flag that time by, I think he still had some opportunities, especially going into turn 5, that he mastered all throughout the race to try and pull it off, and it didn't work out for him, and it ended in absolute tears for the both of them. So I can imagine Justin Barrera is understandably PO'd after that. I can't really blame the guy. If I was in his shoes, I'd be pretty upset too, and I'm sure Jake Luther is upset as well. A little bit of contact between those two. I think that both of them are pretty displeased with how things developed in the late stages of this race, but man, that was a lot going on there, and I believe we might get some donuts here on the straightaway. Ooh, nearly going into the wall there for your race winner, Gregory Hoveson. He didn't put a foot wrong all throughout last season, didn't put a foot wrong all throughout this race to kick Season 3 off, but he nearly crashed it on his donuts. That would have been very unfortunate, getting very close to the wall there in his donut celebration there. Gregory Hoveson capping off a beautiful Season 3 Race 1 season opener. That could have ended in an absolute disaster there, but he managed to hold it on there. I think it would have been upsetting for him to put a foot wrong during the donuts, and he's doing some more right out of turn 1. It's some beautiful stuff here from Gregory Hoveson, showing off a little bit, but you can't really blame the guy after a fantastic drive like that.
Yeah, it was a great race by him. It was picture perfect from start to finish. So congrats to him with Kyle Domark and then Justin Hall. Great race from Justin. Just got up to P3, avoided the incidents, and finished very strong.
We're going to take a look at our race results from this very dramatic season opener here for the S1 Racing GT3 series. It's Gregory Hoveson having a dominant win, 8.1 seconds over his teammate Kyle Domark, who botched a strategy and just fell off like a rock as Gregory Hoveson began to pull away, setting fastest lap after fastest lap. Those two drivers finish in 1-2 for Delta Sports. And that's Justin Hall finishing in a very quiet P3. And then meanwhile behind them it was anything but. Bradley Alvis sneaks into P4 after that chaos had happened right ahead of him. Jake Luther finishes in P5, where he would have been if he didn't get that move done and try that move on his adversary, but he finishes in 5th. Simon Adderall finishes in 6th. Bialotta finishes in 7th. Justin Barrera finishes in 8th. He still made up 2 spots, but I'm sure he is very annoyed after how that race turned out. He finishes in P8, and that's Santinder De Hinza in P9. He had a very quiet drive. He finishes in 9th. That's Wesley Griffith rounding out your top 10 in 10th. And then we have Shane Brown in P11, Sammy Hendricks in P12, Buenaventura in P13, the last of the drivers to take the checkered flag. And then Cassano, Pern, Retzma, and Grizzle all had issues. Some of them had crashes. Grizzle in P17, he did not take the start, finishes 35 laps down.
Yeah, shout out to Buenaventura for just, had that early crash, turn 2 on lap 1. Just went into, gets fast repair, got back out on track, and made up a few positions just by getting out and running laps.
Yeah, he actually finished in the same spot that he started, so a very honorable drive to continue after a turn 2 lap 1 incident. I wouldn't blame anyone if they decide to alt F4 and just relax for the rest of the evening, but I give him credit for staying out there and concluding this race. So we're taking a one last shot of this dramatic incident that ended this race. That is a bunny hop of the century. I think, what was that, 3.5 feet of air there for the Porsche? What do you think? How much air do you think that was there, Charles?
Yeah, it was definitely 3 feet plus. Yeah, just haven't, like I said, I've never seen anybody jump the curb like that and just get airborne. So that was the new one for me. But that's a tough way to end the race for sure.
Thank our producer Josh, who had that freeze frame there while he was in the air. That was a beautiful shot. That was summed up a very dramatic start to the season. We had incidents galore, a lot of drivers getting caught out by the tricky conditions here, and a very tricky circuit, very unforgiving circuit as well. But it was Gregory Hoveson mastering it and possibly setting a tone for a comeback tour where he looks to maybe get the clean sweep this time around. He was so close to doing it last season, only lost out on 1 race just at the season finale, and it was mainly down to team orders, which was the only reason he didn't go 6 for 6. So I think Gregory Hoveson setting a tone for the year ahead and trying to stake his claim on another championship, his 2nd championship in a row, and get some more wins throughout the season. So we've got a lot coming up here, not just in this series. We've also got a lot coming up here on Apex Racing TV. We've got, let me pull this up on my notes. I should have been prepared for this. So we've got the Radical Esports Cup, the renamed, it was called the Radical Racing Challenge. Now it's called the Radical Esports Cup. We'll donate a nickel or $1 or something like that for every time me and my buddy J.R. Gregory mispronounce the name and call it the Radical Racing Challenge. Even though I do like the name Radical Esports Cup, it has a nice little ring to it. We'll start that season off at the Red Bull Ring. That'll be on Friday, December 15th at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. And we have the ARA Super Formula Series at Fuji. That'll be round 11 of their season. That'll be on Thursday, December 14th, tomorrow here on IPX Racing TV. That'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 a.m. Pacific. And then we've also got the S1 Series, which will be returning here on Apex Racing TV, round 2 at Hockenheim Ring. That'll be on Wednesday, December 27th at 9:10 Eastern and then 6:10 Pacific. So we hope you can all join us there. And then I put in this strictly for you, Charles. We've got the Weekend Warriors to kick off their season 1 of 2024. That'll be round 1 at Watkins Glen. We've got the Formula Fords at 12:40 Eastern, 9:40 Pacific, if I got that correctly. And then it'll be Spec Racer Fords at 2:50 p.m. Eastern and then 11:50 a.m. Pacific. So before we wrap off this broadcast, kind of give the viewers what they might expect from that series. I've had the privilege to commentate that series in your absence. I've always had a blast doing it. So how about you give the viewers a little bit of a guide to what to expect on Super Sunday?
Well, I tell you what, those 2 series, the Weekend Warrior series that's been put on by Ray Esports, when they get to the end of this season, it will be their 10-year anniversary of competition. Formula Fords, if you're a fan of the Formula Fords and you do the official racing, come in. It's double the grid size normally. It's double the length of the race. It's just a barn burner. It's a fantastic community of drivers. They're there week in and week out. And then the Spec Racer Ford. If you like 50-car grids, you should come check the Spec Racer Ford. I mean, and it's fantastic racing. Once again, same group of drivers, big community, really clean racing, really close racing, 4 wide everywhere they can make it work. And so in some places they can't. But I really enjoy the series, and so it's been my passion for the last 3 or 4 seasons as well. Now with picking up the S1 series, I look forward to our next race here at Hockenheim, which is a fun track. It's another technical track, flat, very German, and I expect to see many moves into the hairpin.
Yeah, that'll be, especially on lap 1, I think that'll be very dramatic there to kick the race off. So I think you said better than I ever could, Charles. I think we've got plenty of racing action here in store. It was a pretty eventful start to the season here, a wonderful start to the season 3 of the S1 Racing Series here on Apex Racing TV. The great GT3 action that we come to expect from this series is still alive and well, and I think we're in for a great next 5 races. I hope you, the viewer, will stay tuned here on Apex Racing TV to catch all the wonderful stuff that we have from not just this series, but everything else that we have here to offer here on Apex Racing TV. Our congratulations go out to your winner tonight, Gregory Hoveson, taking his first checkered flag of the season. Certainly not his first from this series. Our thanks go out to Dr. Dabber and Zine, the proud partners of this series. Without them, these broadcasts would not be possible, and this broadcast wouldn't have been nearly as good if it weren't for our awesome producer, Josh Wilkie, working all the graphics and the cameras, and my wonderful co-commentator, Charles Bichelle, for joining us this season. We've still got plenty of blanks to fill, many laps to be turned, and 5 more races to be run this season. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time for the second round of the season at Hockenheim, which I think will be just as dramatic, if not even more dramatic, than the race that we had here today, and I hope to see you all there. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Joshua Wilkie working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching, and we hope to see you wherever it is in the not-too-distant future. Have a great rest of your night.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.